image processing and its applications. Till now, we have covered, if I talk about the very first day, we have covered the digital image processing and intelligence systems introduction. Then we have started with the steganography and the implementation of steganography. Then we have seen and learned about the image enhancement, restoration and segmentation. On second day, we have started with the image morphology and its implementation. We have also seen the image processing operations using Python in the second session of second day. Then we have started the natural language processing using RNN. And yesterday we have completed image classification using artificial neural networks, document image classification using computer visions, and image captioning using recurrent neural network, that is RNN. So till now, in the last 3 days, we have covered the basics of image processing, and we have also started the NLP using RNN. Today we are going to start with the session on convolution neural networks, and parallelly we are also doing hands-on on the image classifications. That is what about the first lecture we are going to have in this SCTP on that 4th day. So in the next two sessions, we are going to learn about the implementation of transfer learning for image classification and image feature extracting using CNN. So I think Meenakshi ma'am has joined now. Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning. Good morning. So sorry, I had some trouble joining in today.
No issue, ma'am. That it is okay at all. So I welcome you, ma'am, in this SCTP on image processing and in its applications.
Thank you.
Should we start, ma'am, now?
Yes, if you permit, we can start straight away.
Okay, no issue, ma'am. So we are going to start the very first session of this SCTP, third SCTP on digital image processing and its application. We are in the 4th day of this 6-day program, and now we have with us Dr. Meenakshi Arya from SRM University, India, with us for this session. So I welcome you, ma'am. Dr. Meenakshi S. Arya is a professor of computer science at SRM University in India. She has a diverse academic and professional experience background and has served in many engineering colleges across the length and breadth of the country in various capacities. Dr. Arya has done from her BTech in computer science and technology from prestigious SNDT Women's University, Mumbai, and is a topper in MTech from the College of Engineering, Pune. She has done her PhD in the field of biometric, watermarking, and has an array of publications to her credit. Dr. Arya has served as head of the department in various colleges across the length of the country. Her research interests are in data science and analytics and digital image processing. She has published papers in reputed journals and conferences and has many book chapters to her credit. She is a senior IEEE member and fellow of IETE also. She has 2 patents and 1 copyright to her credit. Dr. Arya is a professor by choice and has a passion for teaching. She believes in the fact that good education is the key of developing a nation, and in case we can percolate the same sentiments to all the students and making learning fun by bringing innovations to it, our country will grow by leaps and bounds. An avid reader, Dr. Arya has a passion of reading novels and biographies. So I welcome you, Meenakshi ma'am, on the behalf of Purnima Institute of Engineering Technology in this STTP, and I request you to continue for the session. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the wonderful introduction. And I truly believe that it's good education, and more than good education, we need good educators, people who educate themselves by reading. And I always feel that there's no substitute to reading. So I'll just begin Yes, and I'll just begin my presentation. Just give me a moment.
No issue.
So Good morning to all of you, and on behalf of Purnima Institute of Technology as well as SRM Institute of Science and Technology, I welcome you all to this third short-term training program under AQIS on image processing and its applications. And at the outset, I would like to really thank Purnima Institute of Engineering and Technology for giving me this opportunity to connect with people from North while being here in South. So that's been a big achievement during this pandemic period. Well, today I have been given the task of introducing convolutional neural networks to you for image classification. And I will try to bring in a different flavor to this particular presentation because I'm sure past 3 to 4 days you have been hearing a lot about neural networks. But I will go at it in a very systematic or in a very gradual manner because straight away diving into convolutional neural network might be difficult for some people who do not know exactly how a neural network works. Though I'm sure in the previous sessions you would have been introduced to, but as brought out by the outreach coordinator, I try to connect everything to the mathematics or the or what is going actually behind the scenes. So what we'll do is we'll spend a little bit of time on understanding the mathematics behind neural networks, then graduating onto convolutional neural networks, and ultimately understanding how a simple image can be transformed and can be converted into a learning classifier as far as the convolutional neural networks are concerned. So we will have three-step demonstration. In fact, I'll not be getting enough time for a typical hands-on, but what we will do is we'll do a hands-on demonstration on what will be the difference if I subject an image to a simple neural network, what will be the difference if I use a regular convolutional neural network, and third phase is how will a particular neural network behave if I subject it to something like an advanced neural network structure like AlexNet or LeNet or GoogleNet. So these are going to be the three parts of my talk today, and I will go over it gradually so that it makes more sense to you that what is the need of convolutional neural networks and why image processing neural networks are different than the regular neural networks. So with this as the background, I'll just begin my first slide, which I'm sure is a mandatory slide for all talks which talk about anything related to machine learning, deep learning, or artificial intelligence. So at the very big bubble of it is the term called as artificial intelligence, which refers to any technique which will enable computers to mimic human behavior. So every day you are using Cortana, you are using Siri, you are using Google Assistant and such like applications where they are interacting with you as if you are interacting with a human. So when I tell Alexa in the morning, Alexa, are there any notifications for me? Like a good assistant, she tells me, no, Meenakshi, there are no notifications for you. Or she might just tell me, yes, a parcel from Amazon is about to be delivered to you. So she actually tries to mimic, or it's the Alexa which is trying to mimic a human behavior. Then within this bigger bubble, we have a smaller bubble called as machine learning, which basically comprises of, it's a subset of artificial intelligence and it only uses statistical methods. So for doing machine learning, you should be good in mathematics. That's what I always feel. If you are good in statistics, you will always be able to exploit or explore some kind of a pattern in the data, which a statistical measure like mean, median, mode, standard deviation, or covariance can bring out. And then within that small bubble, we have another further smaller bubble, which we have started recently exploring, and that is called as the deep learning. So deep learning is further a subset of machine learning, which makes the computation of multi-layer neural networks feasible. So as you can see, machine learning, if you're good in statistics, you will be able to design or write down these machine learning algorithms. However, for multi-layer neural networks, we use the term called as deep learning. Well, let me iterate on one fact here. It is not that deep learning is a new concept which has come out, let's say, in past 2 to 3 years. No. We all know about Amdahl's law and Moore's law. Yes or no? So Moore's law said that the cost of the computer remaining the same, the number of components doubles every 2 years. That's what Moore said. So, but as of today, when we see this law, we see that this law has kind of been surpassed. And why is deep learning making more sense today? It's making more sense today because you have computation power available at your disposal. So now you are able to do millions of floating point operations per second with computers having capability of doing it within a fraction of a second. That what has changed overall is not that that we didn't know what AI is, or we didn't know what machine learning is. In fact, I remember when I was a graduate student, we did have an elective called as artificial intelligence, which is around 25 years back. So it is not a new domain. It's just that what kick-started artificial intelligence in today's world is the availability of more computational power. Your systems have become more powerful. You have more processing speed, processing capability. You have NVIDIA giving you GPUs which can process at lightning speed. That's why deep learning has become very, very popular nowadays. So what precisely would you would qualify as a neural network? In my definition, it's a system or hardware that is designed to operate like a human brain. So that's my understanding of a neural network. So it should read or translate text, it should identify or classify images, it should recognize speech. Practically, it should be able to do everything that a human brain is supposed to be doing. But how do we achieve a system like that? To achieve a system like that, when I started on my journey of neural networks, I did read a little bit of biology because I happened to take that as a subject during my 11th and 12th standard. So that made me realize that it is very important for us to understand how brain works before we can go on to how neural network works. So I'll just spend a few more minutes on explaining how does exactly our brain work. But before I move on to neural network basics. So what exactly does brain do? It's a massively parallel information processing system. This is very, very important over here. A massively parallel information processing system. So the first requirement that was ever felt to create neural networks was that we should have massively parallel information processing systems, which was not available earlier. As I told you, the availability of massively parallel processing units made it possible for neural networks to become a reality. So how do our brains work? They are huge networks of processing elements, and brain contains a network of around 10 billion neurons. That's what we are talking about. So this is the kind of structure that we are trying to emulate, around 10 billion neurons in a single network. We have not been able to achieve it as of now, but we are in the process of reaching there. So a brain basically comprises of these four main parts, which is very, very important. It comprises of what is, on my left hand side, I have shown what are the parts of brain. And on the right hand side, I have shown what do we make it analogous to as far as a neural network is concerned. So your brain comprises basically of four parts, that is the dendrites, which is akin to the input that you give to a neural network. It comprises of a cell body, also called as soma, which is equivalent to the processor, which is processing the data. You have synaptic, which is the link between one neuron to another neuron. And then finally, you have the axon, which gives you the output. So if you'll see, a neural network is comprised of these four parts only. You give some input, you have got some kind of a processing which happens, and then you have a linkage between one neuron to another, which is used for transmitting the output from one neuron to another. So neurons are connected to other neurons through about 10,000 synapses. So what you are seeing over here, this one neuron going out and attaching to the other neurons, you have 10,000 such connections for each of the neurons, which is huge. Like it will mean that every neuron has around 10,000 inputs which are connected to it, which it needs to process real time, which is a huge amount of processing. A neuron receives inputs from other neurons. Inputs are combined. And once input exceeds a critical level, the neuron discharges a spike, an electric pulse that travels from the body down the axon to the next neuron. So that's why some people who are scared like me of cockroaches, they would immediately start running away or retracting the moment they see a cockroach, because in my case, the neurons which are responsible for fear, or which are responsible for a response to travel backwards, in my case, they fire stronger than the person who's not scared of cockroaches. For him, the input of these scare neurons will not exceed a critical level, and hence he'll not show any kind of an output. So the axon endings almost touch the dendrites or cell body of the next neuron. This is how your neural networks are working. And transmission of an electrical signal from one neuron to the next is affected by neurotransmitters. So you need to study how these neurotransmitters are also working to understand how your human brain works. So now once we are able to appreciate how powerful a processing element in our brain is, we should be able to understand how this particular how this particular neuron is imitated over here. So now you can see that this is the analogous model of a biological neuron which I have created, which gives the mathematical model. So as I had told you, these dendrites are corresponding to the inputs which you have for a given neuron. So for each dendrite, you add some kind of this is the synapse. What is synapse? A linkage from the previous neuron. And this is corresponding to the cell body that I spoke about, where all the processing happens, where you are adding the weights, you are adding the inputs, you are adding some kind of a bias, you are applying some kind of an activation function, and then what you get is the output axon. So you can see we have been able to remodel this particular structure in the form of a mathematical model. This basically is a neuron. Okay, so a biological neuron converted into its corresponding mathematical neuron. Now, what are these weights? How do we determine these inputs? That is where the whole neural network thing comes into picture, right? So let's see what this neural network exactly does and how we are going to map it. So let's say we have got some kind of an input. So we have multiple inputs which are coming to a neural network, and we add a weight to each of the inputs. Why is this weight significant? This weight is significant because some inputs might be of more significance as far as the output is concerned, whereas other inputs might be lesser significant. And how do we decide on these weights? There are multiple algorithms for the same. So those algorithms which tell us how to decide on these weights are called as the learning algorithms. And we have multiple kinds of learning algorithms which are used to learn how these weights can be put. We may have a Hebbian learning, we may have multiple other kinds of learning algorithms, which is beyond the scope of my current lecture, right? Once we have this, the first step is that you multiply the weights with the input that you have. I'm sure that you all know, and you add some kind of a bias. So this equation becomes something like this. You have Wixi plus Bi, which is nothing but, if you see, it's an equation like this. Y is equal to mx plus c. Right? So the earliest neuron that we ever designed, it said that if this Wixi plus Bi is greater than or equal to 0, so I will take the output as 1. Else, if it is less than or equal to 0, the neuron will not fire. That was the simplest neuron, which we call as a perceptron. All right. So what is exactly a perceptron? When we say multi-layer perceptron networks, so those multi-layer perceptron networks actually work on the basis of the concept of perceptron, which was given by McLaughlin, who was the pioneer in artificial intelligence and machine learning algorithms. So what he gave us the first perceptron. He said that when I combine the weight with the input and I add a bias to it, if this particular input function is greater than 0, the output will be transmitted to the next level. If it is less than 0, the output will not be transmitted to the next level. So this was a normal perceptron. Then how was a normal perceptron changed? A normal perceptron was changed when we brought in something called as the activation function. Now, what did activation function say? Activation function said that to this particular function that we have, Wixi plus Bi, we will add some activation function which we call as sigma, and we will let that sigma decide what output are we going to get. All right, so that's why you will see over here, if I just treat it till here, it might be called as a perceptron only. When I apply some kind of an activation function on it, it becomes a sigmoid. All right, why? Because in a sigmoid, now my output cannot be only 0 or 1. It can be any value between 0 to 1. That's the beauty of an activation function. So I say it is not that I am now telling that a neuron will either fire or it will not fire. A neuron may fire the other neurons, but to what intensity will it contribute to firing of other neuron will depend on what is this output Y that I am getting. So as I love to interact with whatever audience I have, could I just get a small feeler from all of you that what do you exactly understand by a neuron? So I'll just come out of this thing, and just for the sake of interacting with my audience, could I just get some kind of a feedback from you that what is your understanding? What exactly is a neuron? Yeah, you can reply to me in chat. I'll be okay reading chat if you know what as per you is a neuron. I see around 49 people out here, so I expect at least four responses. What exactly do you mean by a neuron, or what exactly do you understand by a neuron? It's coming. So nodes in each layer, a cell, any more inputs? No, I don't think. And intermedium that reacts according to the processing the input information and give result to next neurons? No, you probably didn't get my point only. I said, what is a neuron? If I have to define a neuron, how will I define it? The simplest definition of a neuron, if you understood what I just now told you. So a neuron is nothing but a mathematical function. Neuron is this. That's it. This is the definition of a neuron. So it's a function which takes an input xi, performs some kind of a processing on it, applies an activation function on it, and gives me an output. So you may either consider a neuron is fx is equal to y, where this f function is given by sigma wixi plus bi. So neuron is nothing complicated. It's just a function. So now let us see what significance does this particular part have over here. This is clear. What is this step? This step is nothing. It's just adding a little bit of bias to each of the neuron inputs and adding some weight, telling us how significant or insignificant a particular neuron, a particular input is. Does that mean that the weights that I started with in the beginning are the weights which I'm going to continue till end? Maybe not. We'll see why not. Okay, so as I told you, I will be talking about neurons or neural networks in a more mathematical term, which I will try to make it very interesting. That will be my endeavor. But let's see how these activation functions matter. So are we clear now? There is wixi, that is a weight multiplied to the input. We add some bias. Why do you add bias? Because if you will look at the equation of a straight line, y is equal to mx plus c, we are adding this c so that this x is not directly taken as the output. The x is not directly, so you are always expecting, even if x is 0, at least this much of output you are always expecting. So that is what is the significance of bias. That you are saying that even if the input is 0, my neuron is not going to completely fire as 0. It's going to have some kind of a value which will be determined by how much bias have you set up for that particular neuron. Okay, so this is the first step, and then you are applying an activation function on it to determine what output it is going to give. So this y is this particular function, wixi plus bi, on which you have applied the activation function. So let us see how many typical artificial neural network layers are there. We are already aware, I have already explained input layer, hidden layer, and output layer. We didn't speak anything about the hidden layers, which I'm going to subsequently speak to you. Okay, so what does input layer actually contain? It contains those units which receive input from the outside world on which network will learn. Because we are doing image processing, so input to our input layer will be an image. Let's say if I have got a 4x4, 2x2 image, this pixel is 12, this pixel is 13, this pixel is 18, and this pixel is 2. So the input will be, I will convert these pixels into corresponding neurons, and my first input will be 12, second input will be 13, third input will be 18, and fourth input will be 2. That's how my input layer is going to get created. How many neurons will be there in my input layer? That will depend on how much is the size of my image. If my image is 2x2, I will have 4 neurons in the input layer. If my image is 4x4, I will have 16 neurons in the input layer. So on and so forth. Now, once I get this input, I add a weight and a bias to it, and I pass on this particular information using an activation function. I might have some hidden layers in between. Now, you will ask me the obvious question is that how many neurons in the hidden layers? Well, that will determine and depend on how many features do you want to extract. These neurons are nothing but the features which you are trying to extract from the image. Okay, at level 1, you may be extracting low level features. At second hidden layer, you may have slightly higher level features, and as I keep going deeper into the network, the feature complexity keeps increasing. So you will see the number of neurons at each hidden layer will generally keep coming down. And then you might have a single output which this particular network is given, or you may have an output layer, depending on what kind of an output are you expecting. If it's a classifier, you might want it to classify whether the given image was that of a cat or a dog. If I want cat or a dog, then I may have only 2 neurons in the output layer. If I may want, let's say, cat, dog, or camel, I may have 3 input neurons in the output layer. So on and so forth. My output layer will comprise of how many classes am I trying to generate? Okay, how many classes? So that's very, very important for us to understand. Input layer will be equal to the number of pixels, and output layer will be equal to how many classes are we trying to generate. So that's how your typical neural network for an image processing application will work, right? So as I told you, now once we understand these 3 layers, what is important for us to understand are what are these activation functions. As I told you that activation functions will always map the output value between 0 to 1 or -1 to -1 or so on. So what is the main purpose of an activation function? The main purpose of an activation function is that once you calculate the U, what is U? U is Wi xi plus bi. Please be with me, because this is a very, very important concept, because this is where the entire neural network logic stands. That what is the activation function, what kind of a bias are you using, how are you training your neural network? That's where they all are different. So once I use this U as Wi xi plus bi, the activation function is applied on this U. Now, what activation function are you applying will determine what output are you getting. So as I told you, if I apply a unipolar sigmoid function, you can see the value will range from 0 to 1. So irrespective of whatever I get the output of this particular value as, it's going to map that value between 0 to 1. And how do I give this function as? The formula of this function is 1 upon 1 plus e raised to minus lambda u. So whatever value of u I got, let's say the value of u I got is 12. So when I perform this, when I pass it through the activation function called as sigmoid activation function, I am going to get the value 1 plus e raised to, let's assume lambda is 1, e raised to minus 12. So that value will be some value between 0 to 1. Let's say it is 0.6. So that means for a neuron which had the which gave me the value of 12 after performing Wi xi plus bi, when I apply the activation function on it, it is giving me a value of 0.6. This is the value which will be used to fire the neuron of the next layer. Okay. Similarly, the other activation function is bipolar sigmoid function. What is the difference here? Now, if you have understood what is U, you will be able to appreciate now that from one activation function to another, nothing changes except for the formula. So now, given a U, which is again Wi xi plus bi, which is again 12. Now, if I apply a bipolar sigmoid function, what will be the formula? It will be g of u is equal to 1 minus e raised to minus lambda u upon 1 plus e raised to minus lambda u. And now you can see that the value will range from -1 to 1. So now instead of having the value of output ranging from 0 to 1, I have the value of output ranging from -1 to 1. That's where your outputs are going to vary. Right. So this was the most primitive kind of an activation function, which is a sigmoid function, which was used as the first function. Before that, we were only talking about perceptrons, where the output would either be a 0 or the output would be a 1. Followed by perceptron came the concept of a sigmoid. So all the neurons that we studied today are actually not perceptrons. The word itself, multi-layer perceptron network, is actually deceptive, because the neurons that we are talking about today are more of sigmoids rather than perceptrons, because the values range from 0 to 1 or from -1 to 1 or so on and so forth, depending upon which activation function have you applied. So these were the two primitive activation functions which were used in majority of image processing applications. And then I'm sure you would have heard of this particular activation function, which is called as ReLU, which is one of the most popularly used activation functions. The full form being rectified linear unit. So what does ReLU give? ReLU is a very, very simple function which does not truncate the output. So it gives me max of u comma 0. It ranges the values between 0 to whatever value the perceptron can have. So let's say now if my value was 12, so what will a rectified linear unit give me? It will give me maximum between 12 and 0. So the value that it will give as output is 12 itself. Now you can see the range has got changed. Now over here you can have the value ranging from anything to anything. That's why ReLU is said to give you a better, better class. It's a better activation function than what you would have anyhow. Fine. And then once we study convolutional neural networks, you will come across one more activation function, which is called as the softmax activation function, which will always be used at the final layer. That is, this activation function will always be used to generate the outputs. One layer minus the output layer, you'll always apply softmax function. What is the reason for applying that softmax function? The reason is that all these functions you'll see, even if they take an input as a vector, they'll give output only as one value. All the activation functions, except for softmax, even if they take input as a vector, they are going to give output only as one value. However, softmax is such an activation function which, if it takes input as a vector, the output will also be a vector. How important would that be? I will show you subsequently when we come to how. As of now, just remember that for the final layer in any kind of a neural network, we are always going to use a softmax activation function. All right, when we reach the last level or the finale level, the softmax activation function is going to be used. Fine. So these are various kinds of activation functions, and these are the equations for them, and this is the range of values that they can map to. So you can see for ReLU, the value can range from 0 to infinity. Whereas for a sigmoid, the value is 0 to 1. For a step function also, the value ranges from 0 to 1. Right? So you may have multiple variants of these activation functions. Now, once we've understood these activation functions, and these are the corresponding curves for these activation functions. And as I told you, ReLU is one of the most favored activation functions. You'll see that it is used everywhere. Right? So a multi-layer perceptron architecture. Well, before I explain this, let me just go back and just explain to you what exactly are we expecting a neural network to do. So let me take instead of taking a multi-layer neural network like this, let me just take a very simple neural network which has got this input. This is one layer, and this is the output that I have got. Okay, this is a very, very simple representation of any neural network that I'm taking. So let me call this layer as AL-1, the output as AL-1. Let me call this output as AL. All right. So how do I get this AL? I get this AL by doing a simple operation of WL A of L-1 plus bias of L, right? And I apply some kind of an activation function on this to get the AL value, right? So let me not go into what else is happening over here. Now, what is the output of a neural network? Output of a neural network is to, let's say, of an image classifier is that it should be able to classify image. So I'm expecting this AL value to be something Y. But what I got is AL. Let's say this, if this AL is equal to Y, that means my neural network is giving me perfect output. So what am I actually wanting is, my actual aim is that this AL should be equal to Y. Y is the output that I'm expecting. I'm expecting this neural network that I gave an image of a cat. This neural network should tell me with 100% confidence that this particular image is that of a cat. If I get that, that's good enough. But let's say this neural network told me this AL value that I got is only 50%. It is only 0.5. So it has confused me. It tells me there is 50% chance that this image is a cat. Now what do? I want to make this as close to Y as possible. Y is the expected output. This I'm expecting. I already know, because it is a classification problem. Right now I'm discussing with you image classification. So I already know what my output should be because I have a trained data set. I have a labeled data set, sorry. So this is what I'm expecting. Now, let us do a little bit of mathematics over here. Let me just take this term and call it as ZL. So ZL is WL AL minus 1 plus BL. All right. I'm not doing any complex mathematics here. I'm just rewriting this equation 1 using ZL. So my equation 1 will effectively become sigma of ZL. That's it. What is the sigma? Sigma is nothing but the activation functions which we just discussed. All right. So now what exactly is my aim? My aim is that I will find out some cost function. What is cost function? Cost function will be AL minus Y the whole square. The difference between AL and Y. So what the aim of every neural network is to decrease this cost. Every neural network. The only aim is to decrease this cost as much as possible, to make this AL as close to Y as possible. This is what my aim is, to decrease the cost as much as possible. Now, how do I do that? If you'll see over here, this is a very, very simple expression. So my cost, I will just draw a tree kind of a thing here. My cost is dependent on AL, that is what is the output right now, and Y0. If this Y and AL are same, my cost will be 0 and my neural network will be the most perfect neural network. This AL is dependent on ZL. All right, and this ZL is dependent on 3 things. Please see, it is a beautiful representation if you understand it. And BL. Now, what is it? They are all numbers. Whether you talk about WL, whether you talk about AL minus 1, whether you talk about BL, they are all numbers. What is my now my point is that this cost is dependent on AL is dependent on ZL is dependent on WL, AL minus 1 and BL. So if I have got some value of this cost, please see what are we trying to see. We are trying to see that if I change this weight, is it going to cause a change in this cost? Or if I change this AL minus 1, is it going to cause a change in this cost? Of course it will. And if I change this BL, is it going to cause a change in this cost? Yes, it will. So basically what we are trying to see is if we nudge these numbers, or it is something like a radio. You know, you are trying to catch on a frequency. You are trying to reach a perfect station where you will get the desired song that you are asking for. So what do? You tune the frequency. Similarly, we are trying to tune these parameters, which are a part of our neural network, to see what impact they will have on the cost. So basically what we are trying to do is, those of you who have studied mathematics, you would appreciate we are trying to see this. We are trying to see that as we try to change the weight, or as we try to change the AL minus 1, or as we try to change the bias, is it going to cause some change in the cost? That's what we are trying to see. And you can see it's a beautiful chain rule that we get. I will say, if I want to bring out a change in cost, that I can do by changing ZL with respect to WL. And as WL is dependent on AL, I will have this change. And as ZL is dependent on the cost, so I will have this change. Please see how beautifully it is saying. It is saying, what is the rate of change in ZL with respect to WL? What is the rate of change in AL with respect to ZL? And what is the rate of change of cost as far as AL is concerned? So this is what exactly is the aim of a neural network. That's what you say, I am training the neural network. So what are you training? You are changing the weight, you are changing the bias, or you are on the basis of weight and bias, your AL minus 1 is changing. So what are you trying to find out? You are trying to find out the most optimum solution where this cost becomes minimum. That is what the aim is. Okay, so this we saw with respect to just one parameter. We may see what is the rate of change of cost, or how does cost vary if I change AL minus 1. Of course, this equation is going to change. Right? So let us just see a little bit that how does this work out? What will be delta C0 upon delta AL? You know partial derivative. What does this depend on? This is the value of CO is AL minus Y whole square. So it will be 2 AL minus Y. Simple derivatives. There's no complex mathematics available over here. And what will be the rate of change of AL with respect to ZL? It will be whatever is the derivative of your activation function. And similarly, how will your ZL change with respect to weight? The value will just be AL minus 1. So what are you trying to say? You are trying to say that if you just change the weights or if you just change the bias at each iteration, your cost will either increase or it will decrease. Let's say I started with some weights. And then when I saw that cost was coming very high, I changed these weights. Now what happened? The cost became higher. So that means whichever direction I change the weights into, I should go in the reverse direction, which is called as the gradient descent. I'll repeat. I started with some weights. Let's say I started with weight 1, 1, 1. So there were 3 weights, or let's say I started with WL as 1. I was expecting Y to be 20. I got AL as 18. So how much is my cost? My cost is 20 minus 18 whole square. That is 2 square. That is 4. I change my WL to 2. I say, okay, let me update my weight to 2. And now instead of getting AL as 18, I got AL as 16. So what happened to my cost? My cost increased. It became 16. 4 square, 16. That means I have changed my weight in the wrong direction. So what do? I make my weight as, let's say, 0.25. And what I get over here is 19. So what happened to my cost? It decreased. So it became 1. Means I'm going in the right direction. Let me further decrease the weight to, let's say, let me make it 0.15. And what I got over here is 19.85. So my cost has decreased. This I am basically trying to find out which is the minimum point where the cost is the least. After this, when I change WL again to 0.12, my cost suddenly increases. It again becomes 90. So which is the optimal value of weight that I will consider? I'll consider the optimal value of weight as 0.15. So this is what exactly back propagation is. That you are giving the feedback from the output that you have got to change the weights and the bias so as to reduce the cost. So if I may have to explain it in another manner, so the point is every neural network's aims are 2. One is tune the parameters. And which parameters are we talking about? We are talking about the parameters, the weight, the bias, and the activation at the previous level. Once we have tuned the parameters, we want to find out which direction the gradient should descend. We are trying to calculate the gradient descent. And once the main purpose of gradient descent is to reduce or minimize the cost. These are the 3 main aims of any neural network. So what I'll do is, once this artificial neural network concept becomes clear to you, now it will make more sense. Why would I have only 5 nodes over here? Because my input image will be having only 5 pixels. Though this I may not correspond to an image because we always assume image to be a square matrix. So let's say that my image has got 6 neurons or 6 pixels. Then I map them to the first level features. Does it contain a straight line? Does it contain a sleeping line? Does it contain a vertical line? So on and so forth. So each of these features are able to recognize that. This layer might be able to recognize, does it have a combination of sleeping and standing line? And finally, this particular layer will tell me whether it's a 0, whether it's a 1, whether it's a 2, or whether it's a 3. With some probability. With probability 0.8, it tells me it's 0. With probability 0.1, it tells me it's a 1. With probability 0.05, it tells me that it's a 2. And with probability 0.05, it tells me it's a 3. Because sum of all probabilities should be equal to 1. So when I look at this particular classification, I see that the neural network is saying with 80% accuracy that this particular image which I have given it is an image of a 0. So I will go with this classification. This is how your multi-layer perceptron architecture works. So there are multiple types of neural networks, as I told you: feed forward, radial basis, back propagation. What I just now discussed with you was a back propagation neural network, where you back propagate the, based on your output, you back propagate and keep updating the weights and bias so as to get the output properly. Then you have recurrent neural networks, convolutional neural networks, and modular neural networks. So multiple kinds. And convolutional neural networks basically is no different. When I give an input as image and I don't flatten it right straight away, it's called as a CNN. So basically neural networks for images are CNN. So what exactly is an image? You all are aware, when we talk about a color image, it comprises of 3 channels, an R, G, and B channel, and the pixel intensity ranges from 0 to 255. So this pixel will be a sum total of what is the value of R, G, and B. So if the value of R, G, and B is 255, 0, 0, means it's a perfect red pixel. If the value is something like 210, 215, and 0, means it's a combination of R and G with this much of hue and intensity, so on and so forth. So image will have a width and a height, and image is a number which comprises of width into height into 3. This 3 refers to the number of channels that we have, that is RGB channels. So let's do one code. So I have already kept my collaboratory ready. I'll just go here. No, I think it just, yeah. So let's see how a regular neural network will work. So what I have used is the MNIST data set, which basically comprises of, I'll just show you what the MNIST data set will comprise of. It comprises of handwritten characters. So this is the MNIST data set, and it's the most popularly used data set as far as image processing is concerned. So this is the MNIST data set. You can read about it from Wikipedia. It basically comprises of handwritten characters written by humans in different kind of orientations. So as a human, you can recognize this is also 0, this is also 0, and this is also 0. But how do we make the computers recognize that all of these are zeros, all of these are ones, all of these are twos, so on and so forth? That's what the job of a normal neural network for training MNIST is. So what I do is I import this data set from Keras library, which is already, this data set is present there in the Keras library. And I'm going to divide this data set into training data set and testing data set. Okay, what do you mean by training and testing data set? This is already a labeled data set. So what do you mean by a labeled data set? That already, once I have a row which comprises of all the zeros, there's a last column which will correspond to the label. So it will tell that this particular, all these are examples of 0, so on and so forth. So when I divide this data set into training and testing data set, from the testing data set part of it, I remove the label. And I want the data set to classify what particular image does it belong. So what I have done is I'm just importing the MNIST data set from Keras. It will take a minute. And you'll see, if you will just read about the MNIST data set, so each image is a 28 cross 28 pixel. Right? So this 0 is a 28 cross 28, this 0 is a 28 cross 28, so on and so forth. So what this neural network right now is doing, it has downloaded the data set, and now what we are going to do is we are going to convert this data set into a one-dimensional data set. So there are 6,000 images which we are using for training, each image having a size of 28 cross 28. And we have 6,000 images for training. Now you'll see over here, we have not given the Y-train shape, because Y-train is the training, that is what is the label. So label will only be one column. That's why there is no size mentioned over here. Similarly, for testing, we have got 10,000 images, each image of size 28 cross 28, and Y test shape, it is a 10,000, it is a column of 10,000 labels. Right? So this is how we have divided the data set into training and testing data set. Now we are going to just apply a simple neural network. I have imported a lot of libraries, but out of all these libraries, for a normal neural network, I just need this one. I don't need any other library. All these libraries I'll be requiring when I do a convolutional neural network on the same images. So now what are we first of all trying to do? What does a neural network do to an image network? You have to understand. What will the neural network do? A neural network will take an input image, let's say a 2 cross 2 image, and flatten it into 4 pixels. Okay, that's what is called as flattening. So this pixel will correspond to this neuron, this pixel will correspond to this neuron, this to this neuron, and this to this neuron. That's what this particular layer is doing. It is converting the, now you can see over here, what did we do? We flattened the image into 28 cross 28 is 784. So what was earlier a 28 cross 28 image, we flattened it and made it into a vector of 784. Similarly, we did for the X test also, and we are just checking what is the size. And then we normalize the data. Normalizing means what? I told you a pixel value can be any value between 0 to 255. So now instead of having the values from 0 to 255, we are having values only between 0 to 1. So how do I do that? Take any pixel value 12 divided by 255. Take any pixel value 255 divided by 255. So all the pixels value will lie between the range of 0 to 1 only now. Because the lowest pixel value can be 0, which if I divide by 255, it will become 0. The highest pixel value can be 255, which if I again divide by 255, it will become 1. So over here, we have flattened it, and now we are normalizing. Once we have normalized, we are doing a one-hot encoding, means how many total labels are there. So you can see after one-hot encoding, there are 10 labels for each of the classes, as I had shown you in the database. So 10 labels pertaining to each class is what we are looking at. And now we are building a model with stacks. So what are we doing? We are creating a sequential model and adding in the first hidden layer 100 neurons and using the activation function as ReLU, and you can see input shape is 784. So my neural network will be something like this. In the input layer, I will have 784 neurons. This is input layer. 784 neurons, and in the first hidden layer, I will have 100 neurons. Can somebody write in the chat how many neurons will be there in the output layer? I would appreciate if I get an answer from somebody. In the output layer, how many neurons should there be? Yeah, anyone? Oh, you want? Absolutely correct. We should have 10 neurons because there are 0 to 10 digits. So that's what we are trying to classify. Do you want me to zoom this? Sorry, I didn't see that yet. Is this fine? Okay. So we are going to have in the external layer, we are going to have 10 neurons, each corresponding to a digit 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And the output of each neuron being, with what probability do I say that the input image was a 0 or input image was a 1 or 2 or 3 or so on and so forth. That's what we are trying to see. So what I have done is I have just built a simple model in which I have just one hidden layer and I have the output layer with 10 neurons. If you can see here now, you'll be able to appreciate why this 10 only, because I have got only 10 classes. Okay, and the activation function used at the last layer is a softmax function, which I had told you, because softmax, whatever input it takes, it converts it into a vector of the number of neurons that we are specifying in the output layer. So once we build the model, we are just compiling the model. I'm just giving you the model summary so you can see it is training. What do you mean by each epoch? You can see, I'm just going to zoom out the screen a bit. You can see at each epoch, it starts with random weights. And you can see that the loss function, that is CO, which we are calculating, loss function is very high when we begin. And accuracy is very low. But as we keep back propagating the weights, as we keep updating the weights and biases, you can see that the loss is decreasing and the accuracy is increasing. So that's how your normal neural network works. Okay, now let's see if this was a normal neural network, what will a convolutional neural network mean? So why deeper? Deeper networks will be able to use far fewer units. We will be able to reduce the number of features, and we will be able to, look at the network from a very quicker perspective. That's why we go in for a deeper neural network. So what exactly is a convolutional neural network? It's nothing. It's a neural network in which the image is in which the input is an image, and of course, this is very important. Some tricks which we are going to apply there. So what we saw just now in a normal neural network, if you give an input as an image, it immediately flattens the image, thus causing loss of a lot of information about this image. Not extracting probably the features which we would have wanted, or extracting all the features which would be insignificant also. So because of this, we do not use the normal neural networks as far as the image is concerned. What we use is a convolutional neural network. So a visual network, and back to 2D lattice from the abstraction of a 1D feature vector X in neural networks. First difference is that in a normal neural network, your image will be converted into a 1D vector. Whereas in case of a CNN, you are till a long distance letting this image be a 2D vector. Okay, that's the first thing. So let's see how a convolutional neural network works. You can see over here, I have 4 representations. The first box that you see is you perform convolution and you pass the image through an activation function. Okay, so each pixel you perform convolution and you pass it through an activation function. So the activation function generally used is read. Then you do something called as a max pooling. The job of max pooling being dimensionality reduction. Okay, what does convolution do? Convolution helps in feature extraction. Okay, so each convolutional filter will extract some kind of a feature, and what will max pooling do? Each max pooling layer will decrease the size or reduce dimensionality. That's the main job of these 2 layers. Okay, then you have the fully connected last layer. Fully connected layer means the normal neural network that you have. So you can see over here, you'll be able to appreciate what and as I told you, the last layer will always have the activation function as softmax function, because softmax function will give us output as a vector rather than a single value. Okay, now you'll be able to appreciate it more when you look at this diagram carefully. We started with an image which is of size 224 cross 224 cross 3. And ultimately, what we are processing is only, 1 cross 1 cross 1024. 4096. So if I have to multiply 224 into 224, if I had to do it using a normal neural network, my dimensionality of the network would have been too high. What I did is I took this image, extracted the relevant features. So this is feature extraction 1. Okay, here I extracted certain features out of it when I convolved it. Then what did I do? I reduced the dimensionality, RD1. So you can see a 224 cross 224 cross 3 image got converted into 112 cross 112 cross 128 image. Then I further extracted second level features out of this image. And I reduced the dimensionality of the image again. I extracted features, reduce the dimensionality, features, reduce the dimensionality, features, reduce the dimensionality, and finally converted it into a normal neural network. Now you can see over here to the normal neural network, how much is the input? Input is 7 cross 7, which is 49 into 512. That is the input to the next neural network, to the normal neural network. Whereas if I wouldn't have used convolution, I would have given the input to the neural network as 224 into 224 into 3, which was a huge number. And it would take the system or the neural network ages to train this particular image. Fine. So let us see how this architecture works, or how this convolutional neural network works. So this is the way it works. So this is the kernel, also called, or may be also called as a filter, or may also be called as a convolutional filter, whatever. You may give it any name. So what do? I pick up this filter, put it or superimpose it on the input image, and for the entire block, I get a single output. That's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to, from this block or from this particular 3x3 area, which information is the most significant, that information I pick up. And what will determine which significant information I'm looking at? This kernel will determine, also called as filter. So it depends on what kind of data I'm trying to filter out of this input image, or what feature I'm trying to extract, in other words. So what will this convolutional filter be? It will be which feature am I wanting to extract. If I am wanting to extract an edge, it will be a high pass filter. If I am trying to extract some kind of a detail, it will be a low pass filter, so on and so forth. So what this filter is will determine what I'm getting at as an output. So the first layer is like that. Let's see, let's take an example. So I have a 6x6 image, which is the input, and I have two convolutional filters. How many filters can I have? There is no restriction on that. Over here, if you'll see in the previous diagram, I have used 128 filters. Sorry, in this one, I have used 64 filters. I can use as many filters as I want. The number of filters will determine how many features am I trying to extract. So once we have this, let's see here, I have just two filters which are trying to extract some kind of an information. If you see, this filter clearly shows it is trying to identify whether the diagonal is very high, and this filter is trying to find out whether there's a straight line in that particular part of the image. And this is a 6x6 image. Now you'll see in this part of the image, there's a diagonal. In this part of the image, there's another diagonal. In this part of the image, there's another diagonal. And in this part of the image, there's a straight line. So how do we apply these filters on the image? Let's see that. So these are the network parameters to be learned, and each filter detects a small 3x3 pattern. Let's see how we do it. Now I superimpose this filter on this particular image, and I calculate the dot product. So the dot product that I got was 3. Stride 1 means how much am I moving the filter. So I'm just moving the filter 1 by 1 pixel. If I would have had stride 2, I would have first place the filter like this. Okay, I'll go back. If my stride was 2, so now in the next stage, the filter would not move 1 pixel, it would move 2 pixels and put itself like here. But stride 1 means it will move 1 by 1 pixel. So let's see how it works like that. Okay, so this is the first, I superimpose this. You can see 1 into 1 is 1, plus 0 into minus 1 is 0, 0 into minus 1 is 0, 0 into minus 1 is 0, 1 into 1 is 1, so 1 plus 1, 2, this is 0, this is 0, this is 0, and this is 1, so that's how I got this dot product as 3. Now we'll move this particular filter ahead, and we calculate the dot product, which is minus 1, and if stride is 2, I told you this is how the filter is going to move. Okay, let's see after applying stride 1, what is the output image that we get. So this is the output image that we get. Now you can see in this output image, all the values along the diagonal are generally positive. Okay, so that's how you will see. That's what we have got. So we have extracted which particular features are more prominent in this, or in this part of the image, I have a feature like this. In this part of the image, I have a feature like this. Rest all you'll see are either very low values or they are negative values, because this pattern is not same as this pattern. So in the entire image, in these two parts, you have got this kind of a pattern. That's why how you got this filter 1. Similarly, when we apply filter 2, so repeat this first. So this is how you're going to get. Okay, for a single image, now you have calculated 2 features. This is feature 1, this is feature 2. Okay, so this entire, so how many filters do I use? Depending on how much of a feature map do I want to create. And what is the size of each of these images? It's again the size of the image. So if my image was n cross n, I will get feature map as n cross m, where m is the number of filters. Sorry, m is the number of filters. All right, so I'll go back to the previous slide, just a second. I'll go back to this particular slide, which will make more sense now. So this slide, if you'll see, we had a 224 cross 224 cross 3 image, and when I performed the first convolution, I got 224 cross 224 cross 64, meaning I would have applied 64 filters. Right? So these many number of filters I have applied for me to get this as the output. So once we perform the convolution and we get the output, what is the next step? The next step is for us to see the difference. So if I would have given the same image to a neural network, it would have got converted like this, and I would have got some output like this. However, when I have performed convolution, you can see I am able to extract more features out of the image. In case of a fully connected network, feature extraction is very, very meager. But here you can fully extract as many features as you want, right? So the whole CNN, how do you do? So if I have an image of a cat, I convolve it, perform math spooling, convolve it, perform math spooling, and then finally flatten it. And then go ahead with this is the normal neural network. So remember, Convolutional neural network, because you are performing the process of convolution in max pooling. Neural network, because ultimately you are flattening it and applying the normal neural network onto it. And this process can be repeated as many times. How many times are you repeating the process of convolution max pooling will determine how deeper is your network. So deeper is the network, more are going to be these layers, right? So you can see over here, what exactly does now max pooling do? Max pooling is used for downsampling or reducing the dimensionality from one layer to another by replacing n cross n subarea with maximum value. So now we perform convolution. Let's say this is the convolved image. You just now saw, let's say this is one feature of the convolved image. Now what do? I take this particular image and divide it into a 2 cross 2 or a 3 cross 3, depending on what max pool filter size do I have. And out of this entire area, I choose which value is the maximum and I replace the image with that value. Similarly, in this one, I picked up the maximum value and replaced the image with that value. I picked up the maximum value, I picked up the maximum value, and this is my max pooled image. If this was my original convolved image, which had a size 4 cross 4, my max pooled image now has a size 2 cross 2 only. So I have reduced the size of the image from 4 cross 4 to 2 cross 2 by performing the process of max pooling. Okay, what does max pooling help me in? It helps me in reducing the computational load. An obvious question might be that does downsampling not cause a loss in the information of the image? The answer being no, it doesn't. So you can see over here, let's say this was filter 1, this was the output, this was filter 2, this was the output. When we perform max pooling, what is going to be the output? You can see now the output will be this. So these are going to be the two images which I get after max pooling. So this was the original image. I performed a convolution on it. I performed max pooling on it, and I got two 2 cross 2 images as the output. Right? So this is new images, but they are smaller, and each filter is a channel. So as I told you, this can be repeated as many times. So now I get a new image, and I take this new image, perform convolution and max pooling again, and keep increasing, keep going on further. So every time the output that I get is a new image with reduced dimensionality, right? So let's see why pooling or subsampling, because it will not change the object. It will just make the pixels smaller and make the image, it will just make the image smaller. And now you will need fewer parameters to characterize the image. So it's something like you have reduced the number of parameters that are now used. You can see between this image and this image, there's no significant information difference. The difference is only in the size that you have now, right? So CNN compresses a fully connected network in two ways. It reduces the number of connections, shared weights on the edges, and max pooling reduces the complexity. So that's what a CNN does. And also when we are training a convolutional neural network, we have something called as a dropout. So in hidden layer, if I have 100 neurons, during every training, I will drop out some of those neurons. I will not incorporate them for training, so as to prevent overfitting. Overfitting means model learning too much from its own self. That's called as overfitting. So this is dropout is used during training. It is not used during testing, right? So this dropout rate, you will see in every convolutional neural network, you will have generally dropout rate set to 0.4. So at each iteration or at each epoch, I am going to drop out 40% of the neurons in each hidden layer to train the network, so that the network doesn't overfit. This is flattening, and then we are going to take this particular image and flatten it and perform the normal fully connected feed-forward network and expect it to give us the output as the probability of the occurrence of each kind of a class. Okay, so the spatial hyperparameters which we need to consider as far as CNN is concerned, the depth, that how many layers of max pooling and this thing that we are doing, the zero panning, how much of zeros are we adding to the image so as to make it a square image or an image of the size of 2 raised to n. And then stride, whether I'm moving the filter 1, whether I'm moving the filter with stride 2, or I'm moving the filter with stride 3, so on and so forth. So this size we need to fix, and these parameters we need to tune so as to execute a convolutional neural network. So let's see how a convolutional neural network works as far as the same data set is concerned. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the runtime from CPU to, okay, I already have. So you can see if I do not choose a hardware accelerator, my convolutional neural network will take time. So what I do is I'll change the hardware accelerator to GPU, and I'll save this, and I will run this CNN on the same data set MNIST that we had earlier. Over here, what did we do? What I want you to lay emphasis or lay your attention on was that we had flattened the model when we tried to train it. Okay, we flattened it straight away here. Now let's see what are we doing in convolutional neural network. Again, we are importing some kind of libraries which we require. So I'm importing the MNIST data set. Now you can see over here, the dense is the dense is a library which is used for creating the hidden layers. Dropout we will use the dropout now to drop out certain kinds of certain percentage of neurons. We have convolution 2D as one package which we have imported. We have maxpool 2D, and we have the flatten. So these are the operations which we are going to use now in convolutional neural network. Though we had imported these particular libraries, we had not used them as far as a normal neural network was concerned. Okay. So now we are again going to divide this data set into training data set and testing data set. We are just, now you can see the moment I have used a hardware accelerator, the entire process is happening very fast. So over here you will see we have not reshaped the images. They are still as 28 cross 28 cross 1. Why 1? Because MNIST data is black and white data. You can see over here. It is not a RGB data. If it was an RGB data, I would have had the number of channels here as 3. Because it's a grayscale image, the number of channels is 1. And we are just, so you can just draw a comparison between this step of convolutional neural network and this step of neural network. In neural network, we had flattened the image here. So a 38 by 32 pixel image was converted into a 1D 784 pixels. Okay, sorry, it should have been 784. Right, that's what you did. Here you have not flattened, you are taking the image as such. And then after that, we are normalizing the data. Normalizing means converting all pixel values, instead of them being 0 to 255, converting them from 0 to 1 only. And then we are doing one-hot encoding, means you just pay attention here. This is image number 2. So for image number 2, it tells me, it gives me a value of 1 over here, and it gives me a value 0 all across, saying that the image number 2 is a 0. Similarly, over here, the last image, that is the 60,000th image, it is the image of an 8. So this is one-hot encoding, where you say which particular, so you'll have on top, this particular value will be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, so on, and this last value will be 9. So depending on whatever is the label of a given image, so accordingly it will have the, when we convert it into one-hot encoding, it will give you what particular label is associated with that particular image. So now we are going to build the model, as you can see over here. So we are building a model. Now the name of the model, I'm importing a sequential model, and first I'm adding a convolutional 2D layer with 25 filters. With 25 filters, the kernel size is 3 cross 3, stride is 1 cross 1, activation function that I'm using is ReLU, and the input shape is 28 cross 28 cross 1. So I'm taking all the input images one by one, passing them through the convolution filter, passing them through 25 convolutional filters. Each filter has a size 3 cross 3. So my output is going to be how much? Output is going to be 28 cross 28 cross 25. After this first layer, and then I'm going to use the max pooling. Once I get output from this layer, I'm going to use max pooling, and then I'm flattening. So how many convolution and max pooling layers did I use? Just one convolution and one max pooling layer. Then I flattened the output, whatever I got from the max pooling layer. I added a hidden layer in between of 100 neurons, and I use the activation function as ReLU. And finally, I have the last layer, that is the output layer, with 10 neurons, and I'm using the activation function as softmax. So I just draw this neural network, which we have just now seen in my whiteboard. So the neural network is something like this. It takes an input image 28 cross 28 as an input. So I'm not going to show the, so this image is a 28 cross 28 cross 1. It applies 25 filters. So I'm going to get 28 cross 28 cross 25 as the output. Okay, on this particular, on these 25 images, it is applying max pooling. So let's say max pooling reduce the size of each image to 14, or I should not be using 14, 16 cross 16 cross 25. All right, then I flattened this 16 cross 16 cross 16 cross 25. I flattened it and made it into neurons. So how many neurons will I have? 16 cross 16 cross 25. And then I added a hidden layer with 100 neurons over here. This is the flattened layer. This is the dense layer. It's a fully connected, so every neuron will contribute to as an input to every other neuron. And then I have the output layer, which only comprises of 10 neurons. So this will be like this. All right, this is the output. So this is what I have created the convolutional neural network as. All right, so this is let's just run this and let's compile the sequential model. So we are just trying to see how much of accuracy, and now we are training it for 10 epochs. Now you'll see a convolutional neural network will take more time to train. Why will it take more time to train? Because the amount of training that has to be done is obviously more. That's why this network is a deeper network. Now please pay attention to this one. Initially the loss is 0.2 and the accuracy, validation accuracy is 0.976. Just compare it to the first epoch accuracy of a normal neural network. The first epoch loss of a normal neural network was 0.4. Sorry, it was 4.19, and the validation accuracy was 0.85. So you can see in the first epoch itself, we have got the loss function reduced by quite a large amount, and the validation accuracy is also much higher than the validation accuracy as far as the first epoch of a normal neural network was considered. Also, in the after 10 epochs, you can compare the loss and the accuracy. Here the loss was 0.1501 and the accuracy maximum that we achieved after 10 epochs was 0.94. Over here you can see the loss is 0.004 and the accuracy is around 98%. Though what we need to remember is that MNIST dataset is not a very heavy duty dataset. That's why we could just achieve an accuracy of 4% more. However, if you are talking about other datasets where you have colored images, this is going to make a lot of difference. Right? So this is how we compared a normal neural network to a convolutional neural network as far as image processing is concerned. Now I'm going to just take you through, I think I'll take another 5 more minutes to show you some popular neural networks which are used for. Some popular neural networks which you would have heard about are the LeeNet, the AlexNet, the VGGNet, the ResNet, the GoogleNet. Now, what is the difference between all of these networks? The difference between all of these networks is how deeper have they gone. So before I move on to them, you can see over here, these networks have 152 layers. 152 layers. The example which I just now showed you had just one layer. You can see over here, it had just one layer of convolution and max pooling. So it took this much of time to train. Now imagine if I repeat this same thing, if I repeat it for 152 times, that will make my network become more and more deeper. Right, so that's what these popular networks that you, the popular neural networks that you read about, or that you, so they have all been the winners of ImageNet Large Scale Visual Recognition Challenge. This challenge is created by ImageNet, which for the ImageNet dataset, which is a very popular dataset. So in that dataset, you have I'll just let you know. So what is LeeNet? Again, it's a convolutional neural network. So used for training or used for assessing the efficacy on ImageNet dataset. So now you can see how many layers does it have. Sorry, it has got these many layers, and finally it has got a fully connected layer, and the output is again 10 layers only. So this network architecture was proposed by Lee Sun in 1998. Now let's see. So this is how it works. If I give this input image as the input, So it first convolves it and converts it into 28 cross 28 cross 6 after performing the convolution and the ReLU, and the stride is taken as 1. There are 5 cross 5 filters. Can somebody just write in the chat how many filters have I used here? I'll appreciate in case I get an answer. You can see I started with a 32 cross 32 cross 1 image and I came to a 28 cross 28 cross 6 image. So can you tell me how many filters were used here? Absolutely correct. Just 6 filters were used here, because now you will be able to understand this better. Why this 6 came? Why was this 1 replaced by 6? My image does not have 6 channels. My image has 6 different kinds of features now because I used 6 convolutional filters. Similarly, after that, can you tell me what is this function which has caused the size to decrease from 28 cross 28 to 14 cross 14? I have not used max pooling. I have used average pooling here. Average pooling means what? If I have this image now, instead of taking the maximum value, I am taking the average of these 4 pixels and replacing the image by the average value. Can I have min pooling? Yes. You use any metric here. I taught you max pooling. You can use average pooling. So that's where the difference in all the networks is. That what have people used? What kind of a change are you now making to your, what kind of filters are you used for convolution? What kind of pooling are you using? So now you can see over here why I have got 120 neurons here, because 5 fives are 25. So when I multiply 25 with 16, 6 fives are 30, 150 into 25. So, sorry. 5 6 are 30, 150 into, this will be 25, 0, 5 plus 5, 10. I should have had, effectively speaking, 400, but I have only 120 neurons when I come to the hidden layers. So what would be the input over here? Input will be these many neurons. This is the first hidden layer, this is the second hidden layer, and finally at the output, I just have 10 neurons, because this is again a network which is used for training the MNIST data set. All right, so this was LeanIt. Now let's see, as I told you, this ILSVRC, this is like the Olympic event of computer vision. So anybody who's working in computer vision would want to participate in this ImageNet large scale visual recognition challenge. And every year this challenge is thrown open, and 2012 marked the year where a CNN was used to achieve a top 5 test error rate of 15.3%. The next best entry achieved an error rate of 26.2%. So I could reduce the error only till 15.3%. Right? And that was where the LXNet architecture was the winner. This is the largest, one of the largest CNNs till date. And what facilitated the introduction of GPUs and highly optimized CNN implementation and large data set called ImageNet. So let's see what this ImageNet data set has. It has 60 million parameters compared to 60,000 parameters of LeanIt. So AlexNet was the architecture designed by these people, Alex Priskevi, Ilya Sutsekar, and Jeffrey Hinton in 2012. But because Alex was the, he was the guy behind the architecture, so that's why it is called as the AlexNet architecture. So let's see, this is the data set. So it contains 50 plus million labeled high resolution images. The number of categories are 22,000. So my output layer has got 22,000 neurons. You can understand what is the data set that we are talking about. Right? So per category, so how many categories are there? 22,000 categories. Sorry, 220,000 categories. And each category, for each category, we have around 100,000 images. So 1,000 categories and 1.2 million training images. The network that I just now showed you, the MNIST data set, it has just 6,000 images. We are talking about 1.2 million training images, 50,000 validation images, and 15,000 testing images. Okay, that's the data. So what is the task? The task is that if I give you this image, you have to classify it as might, or you have to classify that with highest accuracy. I'm saying it's might. With this much confidence, I'm saying it's black widow. With this much confidence, I say it's cockroach. With this much confidence, I say it's a tick. With this much confidence, I say it's a starfish. So this is what basically your task is. That if I give you an image, you have to tell me out of the 22,000 categories, which category does this image belong to. So what is the, I'll straight away go to the AlexNet architecture. I just skip these few slides and go directly to the, yeah, this is the AlexNet architecture. So now you can see AlexNet architecture, it comprises of 7 such filters. So, or let me just give me a minute. Yeah, I'll come here. Yeah. So first layer has got 96 11 cross 11 filters applied at a stride 4. So always remember, when you are creating deeper neural networks, initially keep the stride size more. As you keep going further, you can keep reducing the stride size. So first layer has got 96 11 cross 11 filters. So now you'll be able to appreciate the architecture. So I have 11 cross 11 filters. How many of them? 96 of them. Then I perform max pooling. The size gets decreased to this. Then I have 5 cross 5 filters with a stride 1. You can see here I took a stride 4. Why? Because I want to extract features more coarsely from the image. Now I want to extract features more finitely from the image. So how many filters? You can see after 96, now I have 256 filters here. Again, perform a max pooling with a 3 cross 3 filter. Keep doing so. So how many layers? 7 layers. And finally, you come to the flattening layer. Okay, this is how it is, AlexNet architecture. So you have 5 convolutional layers. Convolution, by convolution layer, I mean to say convolution max pooling combined together. And then you have the 3 fully connected layers, and then you have 1000 way softmax. Because in the challenge, they tell you to categorize all the images in 1000 categories only. Right? And this is the way this particular architecture works. So what I'm going to do is, I'm just going to give you a small demo on this. I know I'm running short of time. Only if you permit, I can give you a demo. Otherwise, I'll stop the session here. I have the AlexNet demo ready with me. So you can just tell me whether you want the demo or should I conclude the session.
Madam, we have 5 minutes, so we can make.
Yeah, I'll try to wind it up in 5 minutes. Yeah, okay, fine. Yes, great. So now what I'll do is as I had told you, I'll cover this in 3 parts. I told you how the image will work if I use a normal neural network. I told you how the image will be classified if I use a convolutional neural network. Now I am using a deep neural network called AlexNet. So just see very quickly, now you'll be able to simulate it. So I'm importing all the libraries. Remember, my runtime is GPU. That's why it is giving me faster output. If I keep the runtime as normal, it will now then cause me a problem. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm importing all the libraries. Now this will take a little bit of time, so you'll have to bear with me. All the libraries got imported. Now the first convolution layer, you can see. Please pay attention here. Filters 96. Input shape 32 cross 32 cross 3. That's the shape of my image. Now 3 here because all the images in ImageNet dataset are RGB images. That's why there's 3 here. The kernel size 11 cross 11. That's the size of the convolutional filters which we are using. The stride is 4 cross 4 and padding is same. Now which activation function did I use? The ReLU activation function. After convolution, I am using max pooling. The pool size is 2 cross 2, stride is 2 cross 2, and so on and so forth. So I added first convolution layer. Now second convolution layer, 256 filters, kernel size 5 cross 5, stride 1 cross 1. I don't need to mention the input shape here because the input shape would have been generated by the max pooling itself. So max pooling would have changed the shape of the image from 32 cross 32 cross 3 to some 24 cross 24 cross 3 or whatever, or cross 256. So again, the activation function used is ReLU and the max pooling is performed. Now you will see third convolutional layer. In third layer, the interesting thing to note is I have not applied max pooling here. I have just applied convolution with the 384 filters, kernel size 3 cross 3, stride 1 cross 1. And I have just applied the activation function. I have not applied max pooling. Perfectly fine. Up to me. Whether I will follow each convolution layer with a max pooling or not, it's my decision. Fourth layer, again only convolution. So I have extracted features. Fifth layer, again only convolution. Sorry, fifth layer, I have used a max pooling again now. It's up to me. I am designing the network. I will decide whether I want to follow every max pooling. So after that, I add the flattening layer. I have flattened the image now. I add the first dense layer, that is the first hidden layer with how many neurons? With 4096 neurons. And I say that the input image had a shape of this. Okay. I add a dropout rate of 40% so as to prevent overfitting. I connect the second hidden layer. Again, you'll see second hidden layer also has got 4096 neurons. I use the ReLU activation function at the dropout. Third fully connected layer, only 1000 neurons now. So third hidden layer has only 1000 neurons. Activation function used is ReLU. Dropout rate is again 40%. And finally, I have the output layer, which comprises of just 10 neurons. And you can see the activation function used here is not ReLU, it's softmax. So if I have to explain the softmax, you all can go back and check what is the difference between a softmax activation function and a ReLU. Now we are training. This gives us the network parameters. You can see how many parameters are we training at each layer. At this layer, I am training these many number of parameters. So it's a huge network that we are talking about. And now what we will do is we'll try to compile the. So I have over here used the CIFAR-10 dataset instead of using a MNIST dataset, because CIFAR-10 is a RGB dataset. I'll just show you the CIFAR-10 dataset. The way you have MNIST dataset, similarly you have CIFAR-10, CIFAR-100, so on and so forth. So CIFAR-10 dataset. This is the CIFAR-10 dataset. You can see, right? So wait, I'll in fact go here and show you the data set. Just a second. This is CIFAR-10. So there is CIFAR-100 also. This is the CIFAR-10 data set used in object recognition. So there are 10 categories. You can get the data set in Kaggle also. I'll not spend much time here. So you can remember that the output categories are 10 categories over here. So I imported this CIFAR-10 data set. I split it into training and testing, did the same thing what I did for a normal neural network. I did the one-hot encoding over here, which I already explained to you. I do some kind of a data augmentation here. This is nothing. This is normal what you do in. I'm not using the model as of now. So now over here, I am training the data set using the models. I'm again using just 10 epochs, you can see over here. And we are just using AlexNet to train the model. Now see what happens. Obviously, because it's a very deep neural network, it's going to take some time. So while this network is training, I have already run it. I'll show you. So this is the training accuracy versus validation accuracy. This is how the confusion matrix looks like. So it is always classifying an automobile as an automobile. 971 times it is classifying automobile as an automobile, so on and so forth. And that's how this particular network works. So what is more important for us to understand is not this. What is more important for us is to understand is the part till here, that how are we creating a deep neural. You can see initially the loss is this. So we are going to train it, and you can see it is training the input, right? I think it stopped. So it will take some time. I'll leave it to you. I'll share the code with you, and you can try it at your own place. So I think, sir, I wound it up in 6 minutes. You had given me 5, but 6 minutes is what it took me. So that's all from my side. Thank you so very much. So let me come to my thank you slide. That's more important. So thank you so much. Thank you for being such patient listeners. And I hope this lecture added some value to all of you. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Meenakshi Madam. It was indeed a wonderful session. And we came to know about the basics of convolutional neural network, all the operations such as convolution, max pooling, flattening, and we have seen the implementation also. You have shown 3 programs. So it was a great, madam. Thank you very much, Meenakshi Madam.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. So in this way, now we are closing the session 1 of day 4. And this session was on convolutional neural network and implementation of image classification. Now we are moving towards second session of day 4, and the second session will be on the same convolutional neural network, but now we are going to implement image classification using transfer learning. So real demonstration of the project will be given, that how do we develop a project, how can we save images into our drive, and how can we classify images using transfer learning such as BGG16, BGG19, LXNet, LayNet, ResNet. So that what we are going to get a demonstration of this in the next session now at 11:45. So I will request all the participants to stay back, and we are going to start in now 5 minutes.
Okay.
For the next
With
session.
your permission, sir, I'll leave the meeting, and thank you so much for the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you very much.